Joining me now live to discuss is Charles Miller, lecturer at the ANU School of Politics and International Relations. Charles, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. What do you believe Nancy Pelosi's legacy will be?
I think Nancy Pelosi's legacy will broadly be positive for the Democratic Party. I mean, she's renowned as a fairly canny politician, and I think she goes out having gone down to, albeit it's a defeat in the sense that the Democrats have lost the House, but it's a defeat that's nothing like as bad as what the polls were predicting. So she is going out in a certain sense in a high, and she's always been respected by people from across the aisle in the United States as being a canny political operator and a very clever parliamentarian. So I think that her legacy will broadly be seen as positive.
So what happens now? Who will likely take over as House Speaker?
I couldn't say, to be perfectly honest. I mean, that's really up to the Democratic Party in the House. But I think it does need really to move on and to try and get somebody from the younger generation, because the generation of Democrats who are in power, including President Biden, are now very, very old. And I think that they're absolutely right to ask for younger blood.
Let's move on now to, of course, the midterms. Republicans have won back control of the House of Representatives. What impact will this have on President Joe Biden?
I mean, it will have something of an impact on President Joe Biden. It will make it much harder for him to get a lot of his domestic agenda passed. So he will still be able to have judicial nominees confirmed, given that they still have control of the Senate. Obviously, he still has control of foreign policy, but his domestic agenda, including spending bills and so on, that will be much, much harder to get through. Essentially, he won't be able to get through much in the way of domestic legislation before the next election. So it will be pretty major for him. However, because the margin of the Democrats' defeat and the Republicans' majority is very small, it actually also makes it quite difficult for the Republicans really to do very much either, because all it takes is a very small rebellion on the part of some Republican members, and the Republican leadership's agenda is stymied as well. Now, as you were mentioning on the bulletin earlier, it looks like the Republicans will look to launch investigations of President Biden and of his son. I can't really see them coming to very much, to be perfectly honest. And if they do so and they spend most of their time on those kind of issues, then that could very well backfire for them coming up for the 2024 presidential elections.
There's no doubt that one will be one to watch for sure. Meanwhile, of course, this week, Donald Trump has made a fresh bid for the White House. Do you believe that he still has that same pull like he used to?
Amongst some of his supporters, he definitely does. And amongst a lot of the Republicans, he still has, if not necessarily a pull, then a certain fear factor. So I think it's interesting to note that although there have been murmurings or words spoken against Trump by Republicans since he announced his candidacy for president, they haven't been public. So until senior Republicans are willing to go public and say, okay, I don't think that he should be running for president, or to really criticize him in serious ways, then I wouldn't take them terribly seriously. I still do think that Donald Trump is probably the favorite to get the Republican nomination. Whether, however, he still has the same power with the general public that he does in 2016 is not quite so sure. I mean, obviously, we have to remember that he has now been president, and people have seen how he coped or didn't cope when he was in office. And in addition to this, obviously, he doesn't have Twitter anymore. I mean, that, of course, could change. But the ability that he had to get his message out, to constantly dominate the news cycle, which he had when he was using social media all the time, even though what he was saying was driving some of his aides up the wall, nonetheless, it was still allowing him to monopolize the news cycle in a way that he can't now that he is not regularly on there. So we will see. I think that he's still probably the favorite for the Republican nomination, but I would judge his chances as being somewhat weaker in the actual general election in 2024, assuming he wins the nomination, than they were back in 2016 when he first was elected.
And off the back of the midterms, of course, everyone was talking about Ron DeSantis following his incredible success in the midterms. And is he then the future of the Republican Party? But with Donald Trump's announcement this week, what does it mean for DeSantis, do you think?
Well, it's going to be quite difficult for DeSantis because DeSantis is really gunning for the same type of Republican that Donald Trump is gunning for. And Republicans of a more conventional variety, that is more conventional in terms of their style, which is what DeSantis is, who have tried to directly gun for Donald Trump before, haven't done terribly well. So you look at Ted Cruz, you look at Marco Rubio, it didn't work out terribly well for them. Now, whether DeSantis can manage this or not, whether you can squeeze Trump out, again, I'm a little bit skeptical because although he is more disciplined than Trump, and although he has many of the same policy preferences as Donald Trump, what he doesn't have is that ability to grab people's attention for good or ill that Donald Trump did, or that kind of fanatical devotion that Donald Trump was able to engender amongst his supporters. So I still see, with respect to DeSantis, that we really need to wait and see whether he's got what it takes. And if he believes that it's a big pardon, that Donald Trump doesn't have, can't really be taken down in this cycle, he may choose to wait until 2028 before really making his bid for president.
Another fascinating week in US politics, as always. Charles Miller, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
You're welcome. Thank you.